Good day and
Howdy.
howdy. Welcome to the next episode of Just One Thing. Just One Thing is the podcast of mindfulliving.today. You can also find us on Facebook at Mindful Couple, and we would love for you to join our very supportive group on Facebook groups, Mindful Living Today with Lisa and Brad.
We're also on Instagram at Mindful Couple.
We are?
We are.
Okay. Today we are going to discuss overcoming beginner frustration. I know whenever you start something new, particularly if it's something that's really outside of your bailiwick, so to speak,
Right.
your wheelhouse, whatever you want to call it,
Right.
sometimes it can be very frustrating because there's a huge learning curve to overcome to actually become
Right.
competent at anything. And there's a repeated sense of failure that occurs
Right.
as you're trying to accomplish that new thing, whether it's learning a new language, a new physical
Sport,
activity,
right.
a sport, something, anything that's
Absolutely
new and stuff.
anything.
And I think particularly as you get older, it becomes more and more difficult to be comfortable with or accept that beginner frustration.
Okay.
When you're a kid, you're learning
Everything's
stuff
new.
all the time. So you may get frustrated or not, but it doesn't matter because you got to learn new stuff all the time. But once you get to be an adult and you think you have a certain amount of competence in certain things, it's very difficult to take on new things because that feeling of failure and frustration that sort of accumulates as you're trying to learn something new keeps you from trying and doing and mastering new things.
Okay.
And I think one of the secrets to continued well-being is constant growth.
Oh,
constant
absolutely.
learning,
Yes.
curiosity,
Yes.
Mastering new things, learning new things, etc. And if that frustration or that inability to deal with that frustration gets in your way, I think you're really standing in the way of your own happiness.
Okay.
So
Good pretext to start with.
I know you wanted to talk about this. Was in the context, I think, of an article
Meditation, yes.
that you wrote. It was called "Overcoming Beginner Frustration with Meditation."
Right,
So that's. But you said we could talk about beginner frustration with everything. So
Yes.
why don't you spend a few minutes talking about beginner frustration with mindfulness and how you can overcome that?
Okay. Well, like we said, I think these, once you understand what's getting in the way and what you need to
Right.
do to sidestep that, go around it, overcome it, whatever, I think then you have to recognize that that's a skill that you have learned. Oh, when things get hard for me, I can do X, Y, and Z.
Okay.
Those are my go. And everybody's go-tos are not the same
So
to me.
what? Okay.
Well, just give me a minute here.
Okay. Gotcha.
All right. So with meditation, I think the thing that I'm going to start there, but again, this applies to anything.
Okay.
So, and I'll give you several examples right out of the gate with meditation.
Okay.
So what I notice when I say, meditation's good for you, or let's try a meditation, or whatever, there are invariably going to be people in the group that have a knee-jerk response that say either, I can't do that, my brain's too busy, I tried it, it didn't work.
Okay.
And so
Sure.
now there is an association with the word meditation.
Oh,
That as soon as somebody says meditation,
uh-huh.
you think, I can't.
Right.
And so that's it. You think you've tried it a couple ways, it didn't work, so you give up. I feel that way about vegetables and exercise. So those two words have knee-jerk reactions to me. If you say exercise, I'm like, yuck, hate it. If you say vegetables, yuck, hate it. So I have to do some kind of internal dance in my mind to say, well, wait a minute. Maybe everything doesn't fit into that category, or maybe I could try it a different way, or whatever. So that's kind of how to me, the broad brushstroke of how just word association related with something, I think, can frequently get in your way.
So that's sort of an accumulated story about the frustration you're going to face.
Right.
Okay.
Right. And so you don't even try because tried that before, tried it once, didn't work well, can't do that anymore.
So before we talk about overcoming it, this frustration, I want to talk a little bit about, are there particular areas where the frustration or the fear of failure and the fear of that frustration is more acute or worse for you than other places? I know for me, if I was to label myself, the one word I would use would be athlete.
Okay, right.
And most things I can pick up and do very quickly, especially like when I was a kid, somebody could just show me something once.
Right, and I could do it.
I could do it.
Yep.
And as I've gotten older, that ability, that plasticity in my brain or whatever has gotten not quite as good as that. And there are certain sports that require lots of practice before you get at it. And it's not like I can immediately do it, and it becomes very frustrating for me. So, and I know we have embraced, and we're going to try to become at least proficient to some degree.
No, we're gonna try to
We're
have
gonna have
fun
fun.
at.
We're
We're gonna try to have
we're going
fun
to take up
at.
golf this summer.
Right.
We've gone out and hit the balls a few times. Back in my late 20s, early 30s, I played a little bit of golf. I'll say a little bit. And
you weren't Tiger Woods right away.
I was not. I didn't hit par the first time out. In fact, it was far from it, and it was very, very frustrating because I couldn't hit the ball the same way twice.
Right.
And so in my mind, I'm like, I don't like this. I don't want to do this.
I don't like this. Right.
I did not like that, and it almost made me feel panicky.
Yes.
When I'm on the course with people and I can't hit the ball right, I'm not demonstrating my ability as an athlete, and it just made me feel horrible all around.
Yes.
And so I've shied away from that, and I couldn't deal with the frustration of that, and so I haven't played golf in 30 years because of the frustration that I experienced.
Right.
And that's very acute for me.
Well,
and
go ahead.
And I think one of the things that I was just going to sort of now approach, how do I overcome that?
Right.
Is be less. This is what we talked about last week. Is be less tied to outcomes.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely.
Not worry about how things turn out. Just enjoy the experience. If I get better at it, great.
Right.
If I don't get better at it, well, that's okay too. I'm just out here to spend enjoyable afternoon with you in nature, enjoy the course, etc. If it takes me 3,000 hits to get the ball in the hole, that's okay. And
so I think it is that attachment to outcome that creates the frustration, because we have a preconceived notion of if I'm going to learn to play violin, I'm going to pick up the violin, I'm going to take 3 lessons, and I'm going to have an idea of how to play the violin.
Oh, yeah.
Well, okay, maybe, but there's a good chance it's going to take 12 lessons.
Well, it's like trying to play a B chord when you're borrowing the top string.
You got cat claw fingers.
I can't do that.
Right.
It's really hard. But then all of a sudden, if you're persistent, if you can deal with that frustration, all of a sudden, many times, most times, I will say almost all the time, you will experience a breakthrough.
And if you are always moving towards enjoyment, I think it has to be moving towards,
or at least acceptance.
Right.
Yeah, and I think and it's the persistence, the acceptance. I'm going to have these feelings. It's not going to be quick. It's not going to be immediate. I think you can probably learn to become competent at almost anything. You may not be Tiger Woods, as we were talking about, but you will develop some degree of competence, and then you will not only enjoy the outing in the outdoors when it comes to golf, but you actually may be hitting the ball competently once in a while.
This is something that goes back to some of the other conversations that we've had. Especially, I know we've talked about what we've learned playing board games.
Yeah.
And I think when you have that feeling, we'll use your example. I'm an athlete. I identify myself as an athlete. I expect that when I go to do something athletic, it's going to come easy. When that is challenged, it challenges our identity.
Absolutely.
It challenges our very core to say, well, you're not who you think you are.
Exactly.
And that's where that uncomfortable feeling comes from. And I think that is the learning moment. The learning moment is recognizing,
well, I am not that thing.
Right. I am.
That is a part of who I am.
It's just something that I do.
Yes,
right.
Exactly.
But it doesn't define my whole being as a person.
Right.
Athlete. I'm also kind. I'm also an artist. I'm also. There's all these other things, and so I think when that feeling, that deep anxiety feeling or fear of failure or frustration comes up. That's a good time to pause and look at those feelings and say, well, what's the big deal here?
And where's that coming from? And is it really that big a deal or not?
Right. And I think especially in terms of meditation, I would love to go back to meditation because I think this is such an important... That's okay. Well, we said we were going to address this to everything. But I think something like meditation, it generally is only you in the room doing whatever you're doing. Yeah. There's nobody else looking. It's not like you're going to get a grade on a paper. No. It's not like there's people watching you. It's generally you trying to do something for you. And so can you look at that and say, well, so what if my mind wanders? So what if I can only practice my breathing for 5 seconds? Mm-hmm. Like, I'm not getting a grade. I'm not getting left back from 3rd grade. Nobody's going to laugh at me. There's none of those things that we associate with failure that can even happen because it's only us.
Well, and that goes back to, we had an earlier podcast too about setting your own bar. bar
Right.
too high.
Right.
Where, you just like do the experience, learn from it, and even if you do feel those feelings of frustration,
Right.
embrace them. What
Right.
does it really,
Just what
what
am
does
I
it
feeling?
really feel like? And does it really matter? Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And is this feeling something that really is worth me saying, oh, forget it?
Right.
You know what I mean? That's because that's
Sure.
what we're doing. We're saying,
Yes.
oh, there's this feeling and it's making me really uncomfortable. And so I'm going to throw in the towel. I'm done.
Well, yeah. And that's ultimately where it leads to. It's like with golf for me, it's like
Right.
30 years have gone by.
Right.
I haven't picked up a golf club. That's a dumb sport.
That's
I
stupid.
would never do that.
We'll never do it. So I think there's a whole bunch to be learned about this experience of frustration with trying something
Sure.
new. And especially when it comes to those things that make us happier, healthier.
Sure.
Oh
yeah.
All of those. And so vegetables, for example, I think a lot of people have this knee-jerk response to, I hate vegetables.
Well, I'm not good at vegetables.
I'm not good at vegetables. I am definitely not good at vegetables. But you see what I'm saying? It's the word association. This is not,
yes.
But it still prevents you from trying new vegetables.
Sure.
And if you decide, I hate vegetables, I'm not going to try them, then you might miss out on butternut squash. For whatever reason, that may be something. I love butternut squash. Well, great. Now you have something. But I think that lesson applies. Don't you think that lesson applies to everything?
I think that applies
to everything. It applies to everything. So what? Besides golf, I know. What other thing have you felt like you've tried that you've gotten frustrated with and just said, no, that's not for me? It's probably mostly athletic stuff.
Guitar has been difficult.
Okay.
But for whatever reason, I think I did not have, and you talked about it a minute ago, I didn't have a self-identity tied to it in the first place.
Gotcha.
And so it was okay to be frustrated. It was okay to not be good at it. I mean, I'm still not that great at it, but it's okay. It doesn't bother me to sit down and do that. But something that's tied to my identity, that's hard.
Yes.
That is the harder thing.
And I'm thinking the other word, that not only do you identify with it, but trying it and not doing well at it makes you feel vulnerable.
Absolutely, yeah.
And so I think that's the other thing that kind of holds you back.
And there are things that, that when I try, I may find I need help. And I have a very difficult time asking for help because, again, it makes me vulnerable. It makes me feel less than competent.
Right.
I part of my personality in the Myers-Briggs thing is mastering a series of competencies.
Right.
And if I find myself not competent at something, it's very disconcerting. I feel very vulnerable. I feel, I'll use the word failure.
Right.
And so it's very difficult to admit that I don't have a competency, that I need help, that I might need some training, or I might need some coaching, or I might need some teaching in an area because I feel like I can master anything.
Right.
And that holds me back if I experience those kinds of things. And so, one of the things that I think I've increasingly done now as I've passed, my retirement age from full-time work, is to just find things that might be frustrating, that might be new,
brand new,
that
just
are just
new experiences,
and just jump in and see what happens.
Right.
Try to learn, like mastering statistics. I have a good feeling for statistics, but to actually crunch the numbers.
Nobody wants to master statistics.
I do because I like the numbers.
So what comes to my mind is when I used to teach, when I was teaching
Yeah.
snowboarding and trying to teach women over 45 snowboarding.
Okay.
And the women would immediately say, well, I can't do that. And my response to that was, I'm not going to teach you
to be
Shaun
White.
White. Right. Like we're not doing the half pipe with triple flips.
We are not doing the Shaun White.
We are not doing Shaun White. And so, it goes back to that. What is that image of that thing that you have that says, oh no, that's not for me, and that it prevents you. So what kind of things do you think you can do to get over that hurdle? Because I think that can be very challenging for everybody.
I think it's pick something that is going to be challenging.
Okay.
And take the very smallest step that you can define. I think anything can be mastered if you just break it down to the very, very smallest step and keep taking small steps and deal with the emotions that arise as you succeed or failure. Hopefully you've made it small enough that you can, build success upon success. But even if you don't, be okay with those negative emotions and how it feels in you, and know I'm going to be persistent at this until I get to some level of mastery.
Okay.
Competency, maybe not mastery.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'm going to add on to that because I think that's definitely the place to start. My one thing then after that is an affirmation. So be prepared for the voice in your head that's going to say, give up, this is too hard. This is uncomfortable. You're a failure. Don't do this. And so when that thought comes up, you have to be prepared with something positive to put in its place. And so it can be something as simple as, I love learning new things.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And just repeat that to yourself as you're experiencing those emotions.
Yeah.
Just continue to say to yourself, oh, I hear you, but I choose to think, I love experiencing new things.
And even if you don't want a Pollyannish approach to this, you can just acknowledge, this is a hard thing, but I'm a persistent individual.
That's another great affirmation.
And
I'm a persistent individual.
I'll conquer this.
I'm going to get through
make progress. I'll do it.
Right. So I think that's a good pairing of beginner tools to kind of break through that little feeling of, oh, I don't do that.
And again, we emphasize this a lot. We haven't emphasized it that much today. These are hard skills.
They are. They are.
This is not, this is not something that's easy.
We're running out of time, but I think that's the one. I'm going to add one last nugget of thought here, and that is that frequently when we start to do something, like example, snowboarding, all we have is Shaun White in our head.
Right. And let me tell you, the first time you're on a snowboard, you're going to fall.
Nobody is Shaun
You're
White
falling on your butt or you're falling on your face. I guarantee it.
Every 5 minutes, every 5 seconds. So, I think the other thing is that image of what it looks like to do that may be the thing that inspires you to try it.
Right.
But you got to get that image out of your head because that's not going to be you for 10,000 hours, going back to Malcolm Gladwell's book. So we finished up here. Is there anything else you think you'd like to add to this overcoming frustration?
I think just be willing to embrace that frustration because, happiness, well-being comes from learning new things.
Absolutely.
So until next time, this has been Just One Thing.